February 26, 1959. A Soviet search plane banks low over the northern Ural Mountains. Below, an endless white desert of snow and ice stretches toward the horizon. The pilot has been flying this pattern for days, scanning the frozen wilderness for any sign of the missing hikers. His eyes are tired. The glare from the snow is blinding. And then, a dark smear on the slope. Something that shouldn't be there. The rescue party reaches the site on foot. These are not strangers looking for strangers. Many of them are students from the same university as the missing group. They have hiked these mountains together. They have shared campfires and songs. Now they trudge up the frozen slope of a peak called Kholat Syakhl, their hearts heavy with a dread they cannot name. What they find will haunt them for the rest of their lives. The tent. It sits on the exposed slope like a wound in the snow. Collapsed. Half buried. But the wrongness of it is immediate, visceral, impossible to ignore. The tent has been cut open from the inside. Not the entrance, the side. Long, desperate slashes in the canvas, made by people who needed to get out now. Multiple cuts at different heights, as if several people were slashing at once, frantic, terrified. Footprints lead away from the tent, down the slope toward the tree line below. Some are barefoot, some show only socks, in temperatures of -30 degrees Celsius. In a wind that cuts through flesh like a blade. The footprints walk calmly at first, not running, not stumbling, walking. Then they scatter. Then, one by one, they vanish into the snow. The searchers follow the footprints down the slope, toward the dark line of cedar trees at the edge of the forest. What they find there, and what they will find in the months to come as the spring thaw reveals its secrets, will create one of the most disturbing unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. 9 experienced hikers, 9 bodies, and an official explanation so inadequate, so clearly false, that the Soviet government stamped the entire case file classified and sealed it for 30 years. The question that has haunted investigators, families, and researchers for over 6 decades is simple to ask and impossible to answer. What made 9 trained mountaineers cut their way out of their only shelter, abandon their boots and coats, and walk calmly into certain death? What were they running from? Or, and this is the possibility that keeps some researchers awake at night, what were they walking toward? Before we continue this story, I want to ask you something. If you believe these dark mysteries deserve to be remembered, if you believe the dead deserve to have their stories told, you can help us continue this work by liking this video and subscribing. Your support keeps the candle lit and allows us to keep exploring the shadows. Tonight, we will follow 9 young Soviets into the dead heart of winter. We will trace their final days through their own words, their diaries, their photographs, their letters home. We will stand where they stood on that last night, on a slope the indigenous Mansi people had long ago named Kholat Syakhl, which, in their language, means dead mountain. And we will confront the 2 possibilities that have haunted investigators for 60 years, that something inhuman waited for them on that mountain, or that something very human wanted to make sure no one ever learned the truth. Welcome to the Midnight Archives. To understand what happened on Dead Mountain, you must first understand the world that created the 9 young people who climbed it. The year is 1959. Joseph Stalin has been dead for 6 years. The terror of the purges, the midnight arrests, the labor camps that swallowed millions, all of this is fading into memory. A new Soviet Union is being born under Nikita Khrushchev, and a new generation of young Soviets is coming of age who believe, truly believe, in the promise of their country. This is the generation of Sputnik, the generation that launched the first satellite into space and proved that Soviet science, Soviet engineering, Soviet spirit could accomplish anything. They are young, they are idealistic, and they are hungry to test themselves against the world. And in the Soviet Union of 1959, there is no better way to test yourself than mountaineering. Hiking and ski touring are not merely hobbies, they are practically patriotic duties. The state sponsors hiking clubs at every university, every factory, every collective farm. Young people are encouraged to challenge themselves against nature, to prove their physical and mental strength, to demonstrate that the new Soviet man can conquer any obstacle. The Ural Polytechnic Institute in Sverdlovsk, the city now known as Yekaterinburg, is one of the premier engineering schools in the Soviet Union, and its hiking club produces some of the most ambitious expeditions in the country. Among its members are 9 young people who will soon become famous for all the wrong reasons. Every story needs a protagonist, and ours is a 23-year-old engineering student named Igor Alexeyevich Dyatlov. Igor is the kind of young man who seems destined for greatness. He is brilliant, already designing his own radio equipment that outperforms factory-made models. He is charismatic. His friends follow him because he makes the impossible feel achievable. And he is experienced. By the age of 23, he has already led multiple difficult expeditions through some of the most challenging terrain in the Soviet Union. He has a round, open face and dark hair that falls across his forehead. In photographs, he is almost always smiling. Not the forced smile of someone posing for a camera, but the genuine smile of someone who loves his life, who feels most alive when he is planning his next adventure. This expedition, the one that will bear his name forever, is his thesis project. A Category 3 route, the most difficult rating in the Soviet hiking classification system, through the northern Urals in the dead of winter. Successful completion will earn him a master certificate in sport tourism, the highest qualification available. But for Igor, this is about more than a certificate. This is about proving what he already knows in his heart, that there is no mountain he cannot climb, no wilderness he cannot cross, no challenge he cannot overcome. He was the kind of leader you wanted to follow into the unknown. The problem was, the unknown was waiting for him. Igor assembles his team carefully. These are not random volunteers. They are experienced hikers, many of them veterans of previous expeditions together. They know each other's strengths and weaknesses. They trust each other with their lives. They have no idea how soon that trust will be tested. Zinaida Kolmogorova, called Zina, is 22 years old and the heart of the group. She keeps detailed diaries of every expedition, her neat handwriting filling page after page with observations about the weather, the terrain, the moods of her companions. She has an on-again, off-again romance with Igor, the kind of complicated relationship that young people have when they are not yet ready to admit what they feel. Her letters home are full of optimism, full of plans for the future. Lyudmila Dubinina, called Lyuda, is the youngest woman in the group at just 20 years old. She is fierce, competitive, determined to prove herself equal to any of the men. She keeps her own expedition diary, and her entries are sharp, observant, sometimes wickedly funny. She has fought to be here, and she will not let anyone forget it. Alexander Kolevatov is 24, quiet, serious, a physics student with a mysterious gap in his biography. Before university, he worked at a classified nuclear facility, the kind of place that does not appear on any map. Why did he leave? Why is he here, on this expedition, instead of building weapons for the state? These questions hang around him like a shadow, and he does not answer them. Rustam Slobodin is 23, the athlete of the group. He can outpace anyone on skis, his legs tireless, his endurance legendary. He is training to be an engineer, but his true passion is the wilderness. His body will be found with a hairline fracture in his skull, an injury with no external wound, no explanation, no answer. Yuri Doroshenko is 21, tall and strong, Zena's ex-boyfriend. Yes, he still came on the expedition. In the small, intense world of university hiking clubs, you learn to be adults about these things. He is dependable, hard-working, the kind of person you want beside you when things go wrong. Yuri Krivonishenko, called Yuri K, or sometimes Georgie, is 23 and the joker of the group. He plays mandolin around the campfire. He tells stories that make everyone laugh until their sides ache. He is an engineer at the Mayak nuclear facility, the same facility where a devastating accident occurred just 2 years earlier, in 1957. His clothing will later test positive for radioactive contamination. Nikolai Thibault Brignol, called Kolya, is 23, the child of a French father who came to Russia to help build the revolution and was later executed in Stalin's purges. Kolya carries his father's foreign name like a badge of honor and a target on his back. He is an outsider who has fought his way to belonging. His skull will be found shattered. Semyon Zolotaryov, called Sasha, is the mystery. At 38 years old, he is much older than the others, old enough to be their father. He is a war veteran, a survivor of the Eastern Front, his body marked with military tattoos whose meanings he never explains. He joined the group at the last minute, replacing another hiker who dropped out. He was not part of their university. He was not part of their friend group. Why was he there? What was he really looking for? And then there is the 10th member of the group, the one who will not climb the mountain. Yuri Yudin is 21, an economics student, eager and enthusiastic. He has trained for this expedition for months, but shortly after the group sets out, his body betrays him. An old injury flares up, chronic rheumatic pain that makes every step agony. He cannot continue. He will spend the rest of his life, 54 more years, wondering why he survived. January 23rd, 1959. The group gathers at the train station in Sverdlovsk. They pose for photographs, mugging for the camera, full of the invincible energy of youth. They are laughing. They are excited. They have no idea. The journey takes them by train to the small city of Ivdel, then by truck to the tiny settlement of Vizhai, the last outpost of civilization before the wilderness swallows them whole. From there, they will travel on skis, hauling their supplies on sleds, into a landscape that has not changed since the ice ages. In Vizhai, the locals look at them with a mixture of admiration and concern. The northern Urals in January are no place for games, but these young people seem so confident, so well prepared. Surely they know what they are doing. On January 27th, Yuri Yudin's body finally fails him. The pain is too much. He cannot go on. The group stops at an abandoned mining settlement called Second Northern. Here, in a cold, empty cabin, Yuri says goodbye to his friends. He gives some of his supplies to the others. There is no point in carrying extra weight back to civilization. He hugs each of them in turn. The last photograph shows all 10 of them together, standing in the snow outside the cabin. 9 of them will never be photographed alive again. I said goodbye to Igor. I said goodbye to Zina. I shook their hands. I had no idea I was attending their funeral. Yuri Yudin, 2008 interview. As the 9 vanished into the white emptiness of the northern Urals, they carried with them cameras, diaries, and a destination that even the indigenous Mansi people refused to visit. A peak called Otorten, which some translators don't go there, and to reach it, they would have to cross a slope that the Mansi had named long ago. They called it Kholat Syakhl. In their language, it means dead mountain. We have an extraordinary window into the final days of the Dyatlov group, their own words. When the tent was discovered, the searchers found the group's cameras and diaries inside, preserved by the frozen air. These documents allow us to walk beside them, to see through their eyes, to feel what they felt as they pushed deeper into the wilderness. The entries are achingly normal. January 28th. The group makes slow progress through deep snow. The weather is cold, but manageable. Zina complains about the weight of her pack. Yuri K entertains everyone with a song. They make camp in the forest and share stories around the fire. January 29th. More difficult terrain. The group loses the trail and has to backtrack. Igor seems frustrated but keeps his spirits up. Liuda writes that she is tired but happy. "We are a good team," she notes. "We will make it." January 30th. The weather worsens. Wind and snow make travel nearly impossible. The group decides to wait out the storm in a temporary camp. They play cards. They argue about politics. They are bored and restless, eager to move forward. January 31st. The storm clears. The group pushes on with renewed energy. They are now approaching the high, exposed ridges that lead to their destination. The forest is thinning. The landscape is becoming starker, more alien. They are entering the realm of the dead mountain. These diaries show a group that is competent, prepared, and in good spirits. They are not lost. They are not panicking. They are not fighting with each other. Whatever killed them was not visible on the way in. The indigenous Mansi people have lived in these mountains for thousands of years. They hunt elk and reindeer. They fish the frozen rivers. They know every valley, every peak, every treacherous slope in this vast and ancient landscape. And they do not go to Kholat Syakhl. The Mansi tell stories about this place, stories passed down through generations around winter fires. Some say that a tribe of Mansi was destroyed there long ago, wiped out by a force they could not understand. Others speak of something that lives on the mountain, something that does not like visitors, something that punishes those who trespass on its domain. The name itself is a warning. Kholat Syakhl, dead mountain. Not dangerous mountain or difficult mountain, dead. A place where death lives. Did the Dyatlov group hear these warnings? The records are unclear. They passed through Mansi territory on their way north. They may have spoken with hunters or herders along the route. But whether they received any warning, and whether they would have heeded it if they had, we cannot know. What we do know is this: the Mansi had been avoiding that mountain for longer than anyone could remember. And the 9 young Soviets, raised in a culture that dismissed such beliefs as primitive superstition, walked directly into its shadow. There are places where the earth remembers things, places that have tasted death and developed a hunger for it. February 1st, 1959, the group's last full day alive. The cameras recovered from the tent contain the final photographs taken by the group. We can trace their movements through these images, watching their last hours unfold frame by frame. Morning. The group breaks camp in the forest and begins the ascent toward the ridge. The photographs show them in good spirits, smiling, making jokes. One image shows someone's face partly obscured by a fur hat, eyes squinting against the wind. Midday. The group reaches the exposed slopes of Kholat Syakhl. The photographs become darker, grainier. The weather is deteriorating. But they press on. Late afternoon, the group makes a decision that puzzles investigators to this day. Instead of descending to the forest, where there is shelter from the wind, firewood, protection, they pitch their tent on the exposed slope of the mountain itself. Why? Perhaps they did not want to lose the altitude they had gained. Perhaps they judged the weather stable enough to risk a night in the open. Perhaps they were simply too tired to continue. The final photographs show them digging a platform into the snow, setting up the tent, settling in for the night. They are doing everything right. They are experienced. They are careful. And then there is one more photograph. A blurry image taken in near darkness. Some researchers see only a developing error, a light leak in the camera. Others see something else, a strange glow in the sky, an object that should not be there. We will never know for certain what that photograph shows. Like so much about this case, it remains an enigma. Picture the scene as night falls on February 1st. The tent sits on the slope, a fragile island of warmth in a frozen sea. Inside, 9 young people crowd together. The temperature outside is 30 degrees below zero. The wind is rising, rattling the canvas walls. But inside, they are safe. They have food. They have fuel for the stove. They have each other. The nearest human being is miles away. The nearest help is days away. If something goes wrong up here, they are utterly alone. But what could go wrong? They have done everything right. They are experienced. They are prepared. They eat dinner, dried meat, crackers, perhaps some dried fruit. Yuri K probably plays his mandolin, the notes thin and fragile in the frozen air. They write in their diaries. They talk about the climb ahead, about reaching Otorten, about the celebrations they will have when they return home. The last diary entry is dated February 1st, 1959. After that, only silence. What happened in the hours between that final diary entry and the moment someone took a knife and cut their way out of the tent? We will never know for certain. But we can reconstruct the evidence. We can look at the bodies, the positions, the injuries. We can follow the footprints into the dark. Something happened on that mountain. Something that made 9 rational, experienced hikers abandon everything that could save them and walk barefoot into a -30-degree night. In the next chapter, we will stand with them in that tent, and we will try to understand the terror that drove them into the cold. The physical evidence tells a story of sudden, desperate terror. When the searchers examined the tent, they found something that defied explanation. The canvas had been slashed, not from outside, but from within, multiple cuts at different heights made by people who were standing, kneeling, perhaps even lying down when they took their knives to the walls of their own shelter. Think about what this means. These were not inexperienced children. These were seasoned mountaineers who understood, who knew in their bones, that the tent was the only thing keeping them alive. Without it, they would die. This was not a theoretical understanding. This was absolute certainty. And yet, they cut their way out. Not one person, multiple people, slashing at the canvas with whatever they had in their hands, not bothering to use the entrance, needing to get out now, right now, this instant. Inside the tent, the searchers found everything left behind. Food, half-eaten, the stove, still assembled, boots, precious, life-saving boots, lying where they had been kicked off, coats and jackets, neatly folded, cameras, diaries, everything that could have saved them, abandoned. What could possibly make a person abandon their boots in -30-degree weather? What could be so terrifying that the certain death of freezing seemed preferable to staying inside? The footprints tell the next part of the story. 8 or 9 sets of prints, leading away from the tent, down the slope toward the tree line 1.5 kilometers below. The snow had preserved them perfectly, a frozen record of the group's final journey. And here is the detail that haunts investigators to this day. The footprints are walking, not running, not stumbling in panic, walking in a relatively organized group, maintaining a steady pace, moving with purpose. This is perhaps the most disturbing detail of the entire case. They cut their way out of the tent in what appears to be blind terror, and then, once outside, they walked calmly into the frozen darkness. What does this mean? One possibility. Whatever frightened them was inside the tent or immediately around it. Once they were outside, the immediate threat was behind them, and they could think clearly enough to move in an organized way. Another possibility. They were not fleeing from something. They were walking towards something, following something, obeying something, drawn by something we cannot understand. A third possibility. They were already so affected by whatever happened, hypothermia beginning to set in, shock, perhaps something affecting their minds, that they were no longer capable of rational thought. They were walking because their bodies remembered how to walk, even as their minds were failing. The footprints continue down the slope for several hundred meters. Then they begin to scatter, spreading apart. Then, one by one, they disappear into the snow. We cannot know for certain what drove them out, but we can imagine the possibilities. Imagine the avalanche. You are lying in the tent, perhaps already half asleep. Suddenly, you hear it, a deep, rumbling crack from somewhere above. The snow is moving. The tent begins to shake. Someone screams. The walls are pressing in. You cannot reach the entrance. The snow is collapsing the tent, pinning it down. You grab your knife and slash at the canvas. You have to get out. You have to get out now. But the evidence does not support this theory. The tent was not buried. The supports were not broken from above. The snow around the tent showed no signs of avalanche debris, and the injuries on the bodies are not consistent with avalanche trauma. Imagine the infrasound. You are lying in the tent. The wind is howling outside, and then you feel it. A strange pressure in your ears, a vibration in your chest that you feel more than hear. Your heart begins to race. Your skin crawls. A wave of pure, irrational terror floods through your body. The kind of fear that bypasses thought entirely, that triggers every survival instinct you possess. You have to get out. You don't know why. You just have to get out. Now. Infrasound, sound waves below the range of human hearing, can cause exactly these symptoms: panic, nausea, hallucinations, the overwhelming sense of a malevolent presence. Certain wind patterns in mountain passes can generate infrasound, and the geography of Dyatlov Pass creates exactly these conditions. Imagine the military test. You are lying in the tent. Suddenly, the darkness outside turns to light, a brilliant, pulsing orange glow that penetrates the canvas walls. A sound like thunder, but wrong somehow, too sharp, too close. The ground shakes. You realize, with dawning horror, you are not supposed to be here. You have stumbled into something secret, something dangerous, something the state does not want witnessed. And whoever is responsible for that light knows you have seen it. Multiple witnesses across the region reported strange lights in the sky that night and in the following weeks. Orange spheres, silent flashes, objects that moved in ways that conventional aircraft could not. The Soviet military maintained installations in the Urals. Tests were conducted. Some researchers believe the Dyatlov group witnessed something they were never meant to see. Imagine something else. You are lying in the tent. A sound outside. Not the wind. Not an avalanche. Something moving. Something that shouldn't be there. Something that makes no sense. You look at your friends and see the same impossible realization in their eyes. You grab your knife. You cut your way out. You run. But whatever it is, it's faster. The footprints lead to a large cedar tree at the edge of the forest, 1.5 kilometers from the tent. Here, the first bodies were found. Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko, the two Yuris, were discovered lying in the snow near the remains of a small fire. They had tried to start a fire with whatever they could find: branches, twigs, scraps of their own clothing, a desperate attempt to survive. The fire had burned for 1 to 2 hours before it went out. But here is what truly disturbs. The cedar tree had been climbed. The branches were broken up to 5 meters off the ground. Flesh and skin were found on the bark, as if someone had climbed with such desperate urgency that they had torn their own hands to shreds in the process. From the top of that tree, you can see the slope. You can see where the tent stood. Were they looking back to see if it was safe to return? Or were they watching for something coming down the mountain after them? Both Yuris were barely clothed. Both were barefoot. Both died of hypothermia, their bodies frozen into the snow. They had watched the tent until the cold took them. 3 more bodies were found between the cedar tree and the tent. Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustam Slobodin. They were found in a line, spaced roughly 150 to 180 meters apart, positioned as if they were trying to return to the tent. Igor was found 300 meters from the cedar, face up in the snow, one arm raised as if reaching towards something. Zina was found further up the slope, 630 meters from the tree, face down, her hands raw and torn from the cold, still reaching toward the tent. Rustam was between them, also face down, a hairline fracture in his skull with no external wound to explain it. They must have realized, at some point, that whatever had driven them from the tent was less dangerous than the cold. They tried to go back. They tried to reach their shelter, their boots, their coats. They didn't make it. The terrible question hangs in the frozen air. What was so frightening that they chose to stay outside until they realized they were dying? What made the certain death of hypothermia seem preferable to returning to the tent? The last 4 bodies were not found until May, when the spring thaw finally revealed what the snow had hidden. They were discovered in a ravine 75 meters from the cedar tree, buried under 4 meters of snow, and their bodies told a very different story. Lyudmila Dubinina, fierce, competitive Lyuda, who had fought so hard to be included, had catastrophic chest trauma. Her ribs were crushed inward with a force that investigators compared to a car crash. There were no external wounds, no bruises, nothing to show what had hit her. Nicolas Thibault Brignol, Collier, the French-Russian outsider, had a fatal skull fracture. The back of his head was crushed. Again, no external damage. Semyon Zolotaryov, the mysterious older man, had similar chest trauma. Alexander Kolevatov, the quiet physicist with the classified past, had died of hypothermia like the others near the cedar, but he was found in the ravine with the 3 who had been crushed. And there was one more detail that would fuel decades of speculation and horror. Lyudmila Dubinina was missing her tongue. Her lips were gone. Her eyes were damaged. Whether this was the result of scavenging by animals, natural decomposition in the running water of the ravine, or something else entirely, has been debated for 60 years. These 4 had survived longer than the others. They had better clothing because they had taken it from the bodies of the diaries after they died. They had made it further from the tent, found shelter in the ravine, tried to wait out whatever was happening, and then something killed them with tremendous, crushing force. The investigators in 1959 stood where we stand now, looking at this evidence. 9 dead, 4 with impossible injuries. A tent cut from the inside, footprints that walked calmly into oblivion. They needed an answer. The Soviet state required an answer. So they wrote one. They concluded that all 9 hikers had died due to a compelling natural force. Then they classified the case, sealed the files, and forbade the families from asking questions. For 30 years, the mystery of Dyatlov Pass was buried as deep as the bodies in the ravine. But buried things do not always stay buried. February 12th, 1959. The Dyatlov group was supposed to send a telegram from the village of Vizhai, confirming their safe return from the mountains. No telegram came. At first, no one worried. These expeditions were unpredictable. Bad weather could delay a group for days. The route was difficult, and Igor had planned for contingencies. The telegram was expected on the 12th, but there was flexibility built into the schedule. February 15th, still no word. The families began to make quiet inquiries. February 20th, a week late now, the Ural Polytechnic Institute launched its first search party. Volunteers from the hiking club, friends of the missing 9, people who knew the mountains and wanted desperately to believe their friends were simply delayed. February 26th, the search aircraft spotted the tent on the slope of Kholat Syakhl. Within hours, everything changed. The search party that reached the tent included students who had hiked with the Dyatlov group before. These were not strangers investigating a case. These were friends searching for friends. What they found shattered them. The tent cut from inside, the boots left behind, the footprints leading into the void. They followed the trail down to the cedar tree. They found the 2 diaries, frozen into the snow, barely recognizable as the young men who had laughed and joked at their going-away party just weeks before. In the following days, They found Igor. They found Zina. They found Rustem. Each body a fresh wound. Each discovery another friend lost. But 4 were still missing. The snow was too deep, the winter too harsh. After weeks of searching, the rescue effort was suspended until spring. May 4th, 1959. The snow was finally melting. Mansi hunters and their dogs found the last 4 bodies in the ravine, 75 meters from the cedar tree. They had been buried under 4 meters of snow since February, preserved by the cold, waiting to tell their terrible story. The investigators documented everything. They photographed the bodies in situ, they measured distances, they catalogued injuries, they collected samples, and then something strange began to happen. In late May 1959, the investigation was closed. The official conclusion was maddeningly vague. The 9 hikers had died due to a compelling natural force. What force? Natural how? The report did not say. It did not need to say. In the Soviet Union of 1959, the state's word was final. But the circumstances of the closing raised more questions than answers. The case files were classified, sealed for 25 years. This was extraordinary. Hiking accidents, however tragic, do not usually become state secrets. The families were told not to ask questions. Some were explicitly warned to stop making inquiries. Some were forbidden from visiting the graves. The region around Dyatlov Pass was closed to hikers and civilians for 3 years. 3 years. For a hiking accident. Lev Ivanov, the lead investigator, was a respected prosecutor. Years later, after the Soviet Union collapsed, he would speak publicly about the case for the first time. He said he had been ordered to close the investigation. He said there were things he had wanted to include in the report, observations about fireballs seen in the sky, but that he had been forbidden to document them. When I asked my superiors what to write in the conclusion, they told me to write that they died from a compelling force which the hikers were unable to overcome. Lev Ivanov, 1990 interview. 2 possibilities present themselves. The first, the Soviet government was hiding its own incompetence. The state could not admit that it did not know something. The Soviet system was built on the premise of total knowledge, total control. An unexplained mystery was an embarrassment. Better to seal the files and forbid questions than to admit that 9 young people had died and no one could explain why. The second, the Soviet government was hiding its own involvement. The Urals were not just wilderness. They were a region of military installations, weapons research, and classified experiments. The Mayak nuclear facility, where Yuri Krivonishenko had worked, had suffered a catastrophic accident in 1957, contaminating vast areas of the region. Weapons tests were conducted. Rockets were launched. Things happened in the Urals that the Soviet state wanted no one to know about. What if the Dyatlov group saw something they were not supposed to see? What if they were in the wrong place when a test went wrong? What if they were silenced, not by a natural force, but by a force that was very, very human? Some evidence supports this theory. The clothing of several victims, particularly Yuri Krivonishenko and Lyudmila Dubinina, showed traces of radioactive contamination, not enough to be lethal, but enough to raise questions. Where did it come from? Krivonishenko's work at Mayak is one explanation, but there are others. And then there are the lights. Multiple witnesses across the region, villagers, hunters, other hiking groups, reported seeing strange lights in the sky on the night of February 1st to 2nd, and in the weeks that followed. Orange spheres, silent flashes. objects that moved in ways that conventional aircraft could not. The Soviet military never explained these lights. Investigators were told not to include them in the official report. What were they? Weapons tests, atmospheric phenomena, something else entirely? 60 years later, we still do not know. Yuri Yudin, the 10th member who turned back due to illness, lived until 2013. He spent 54 years asking why. Why did he survive? Why did his body fail him at that crucial moment? Was it a curse or was it a blessing? If he had continued with the group, would he have been able to help them? Or would there simply be 10 graves instead of 9? Yudin became an advocate for reopening the case. He gave interviews. He wrote letters. He demanded answers from a government that had no interest in providing them. He visited the graves every year, standing in the snow, talking to friends who could no longer answer. If I had gone with them, maybe I could have done something. Or maybe there would just be 10 graves instead of 9. Yuri Yudin. He believed, until the day he died, that something was being hidden. He believed his friends deserved the truth. He never got it. For 30 years, the official files gathered dust in a Soviet archive, forbidden and forgotten. The families grew old. The witnesses died. The mystery faded into legend. And then, in the early 1990s, the Soviet Union collapsed. The files were finally unsealed. What they revealed was both more and less than anyone had hoped for. More evidence, more photographs, more testimony, more questions. And at the center of it all, a mystery that refuses to die. Since the files were opened, researchers have proposed dozens of theories to explain what happened on Dyatlov Pass. Some are scientific, some are conspiratorial, some venture into territory that challenges everything we believe about the world. Let us consider them, one by one. The avalanche theory. In 2021, Swiss researchers published a study claiming that a delayed snow slab release could explain most of the evidence. According to their model, the group pitched their tent in a dangerous location. During the night, a small avalanche occurred. Not the massive, burying kind, but a compact slab of wind-hardened snow that slid into the tent. This, they argue, would explain the crushing injuries. The weight of the snow slab could produce exactly the kind of internal trauma seen in Dubinina and Thibaut Brignol, broken ribs, fractured skulls, without leaving external wounds. It would explain the desperate exit. Waking to find your tent collapsing under snow, unable to reach the entrance, you would slash your way out. It would explain the retreat to the forest. Fearing additional slides, the group moved to lower, safer ground. But the theory has problems. The tent was not buried. The supports were not collapsed inward. The footprints were orderly, not the scrambling marks of people fleeing an avalanche. Soviet investigators in 1959, who knew the terrain, who knew avalanches, explicitly ruled out this explanation. And it does not explain why the group did not return to the tent once the immediate danger had passed. The hypothermia theory. In the final stages of hypothermia, the human body malfunctions in bizarre and counterintuitive ways. Blood vessels near the skin dilate, creating a sensation of burning heat. Victims strip off their clothes, convinced they are overheating, even as their core temperature drops toward death. This is called paradoxical undressing. It is documented in hundreds of hypothermia cases. The brain also begins to fail. Judgment deteriorates. Behavior becomes irrational. In extreme cases, Victims crawl into small spaces, a phenomenon called terminal burrowing, as if their dying minds are seeking the safety of a den or cave. Could hypothermia explain the strange behavior of the Dyatlov group? Could the missing clothes, the scattered positions, the failure to return to the tent all be symptoms of brains shutting down in the cold? Perhaps. But hypothermia does not explain what drove them from the tent in the first place. Something had to trigger the flight. Hypothermia was the result, not the cause. The infrasound theory. This is where science begins to shade into nightmare. Infrasound consists of sound waves below the range of human hearing, below 20 Hz. We cannot hear these frequencies, but we can feel them. And their effects on the human body are deeply unsettling. Exposure to infrasound can cause anxiety, panic, and an overwhelming sense of dread. It can produce nausea, disorientation, and difficulty breathing. In some cases, it can trigger hallucinations, the perception of a presence, the sense that something terrible is watching you. Certain geographical features can generate infrasound when wind passes over them in specific ways. The phenomenon is called a von Karman vortex street. And the geography of Dyatlov Pass, the shape of the ridge, the slope of the mountain, creates exactly the conditions necessary for this effect. Imagine you are lying in the tent, the wind is howling, and suddenly, without knowing why, you are filled with the most profound terror of your life. Your heart races, your skin crawls, every instinct screams at you to run. You do not know why you are afraid. You cannot name the threat. But the fear is overwhelming, undeniable, absolute. This could explain the desperate exit from the tent. It could explain the orderly retreat down the slope. Once away from the infrasound source, the panic would fade. It could explain why they did not return. The fear was associated with that location, that tent, and approaching it triggered the terror again. But it does not explain the crushing injuries to the four in the ravine. The conspiratorial explanations, the military test theory. The Soviet military was conducting weapons tests in the Urals in February 1959. This is not speculation, it is documented fact. Parachute mines, thermobaric weapons, rocket tests. The region was a laboratory for the Soviet war machine, and some of those tests went wrong. Witnesses across the region reported seeing bright lights in the sky on the night of February 1st to 2nd. Orange spheres, brilliant flashes, objects that moved in ways conventional aircraft could not. Some researchers believe the Dyatlov group witnessed a failed weapons test, perhaps a rocket that malfunctioned, perhaps a weapon that detonated in the wrong place. The pressure wave from an explosion could produce exactly the kind of internal injuries seen in the ravine victims: crushed ribs, fractured skulls, no external wounds. This would explain the cover-up. A tragic accident is embarrassing, but a weapons test that killed 9 civilians? That is a scandal that must be buried. It would explain the radioactive contamination on the clothing, fallout from a nuclear-related test. It would explain the closing of the region for 3 years, cleanup, cover-up, erasure. But if the military killed them, why leave the bodies to be found? Why not remove all evidence? And what about the footprints? The orderly, walking footprints that suggest the group left the tent under their own power, not from an explosion. The murder theory. Some researchers believe the Dyatlov group was attacked by humans. The Mansi people were initially suspected and quickly cleared. They had no motive, no opportunity, and the evidence did not support an attack. But what about others? Escaped prisoners from the gulag camps that dotted the region, rogue military personnel, criminals fleeing justice. The wilderness of the northern Urals was not as empty as it seemed. But this theory has fatal problems. There were no footprints except those of the Dyatlov group, no evidence of anyone else on the mountain, no signs of struggle at the tent, and the injuries, the crushing internal trauma without external wounds, are not consistent with a human attack, the Zolotaryov theory. And then there is Semyon Zolotaryov, the 38-year-old war veteran, the man with military tattoos and a classified past, the outsider who joined the group at the last minute, replacing another hiker. Why was he there? Some researchers believe Zolotaryov was not what he seemed. His military background, his mysterious behavior, his insistence on joining this particular expedition, all of it raises questions. Was he a KGB agent, sent to observe or recruit the young engineering students? Was he involved in something illegal, and the group stumbled upon it? Was he the target of an attack, and the others were simply collateral damage? We will never know. Zolotaryov's secrets died with him in the ravine. We have examined the rational explanations and the conspiratorial ones. Now we must venture into darker territory. The lights in the sky. On the night of February 1st to 2nd, 1959, and in the weeks that followed, multiple independent witnesses across a vast region reported seeing strange objects in the sky. Bright orange spheres that moved silently, brilliant flashes that lit up the landscape. Objects that hovered, then accelerated away at impossible speeds. The Soviet government never explained these lights. Investigators were ordered not to include them in the official report. The witnesses were told to remain silent. What were they? Some say weapons tests, and this is possible. Some say ball lightning or atmospheric phenomena, also possible. Some say something else entirely. The blurry photograph from the Dyatlov cameras, the one that shows what might be a light in the sky, has never been satisfactorily explained. The indigenous warnings. The Mansi people had avoided Kholat Syakhl for generations. Their oral traditions spoke of death on that mountain long before 1959. 9 Mansi hunters had died there in the ancient past, they said. The mountain was cursed. It was hungry. It did not like visitors. Were they simply passing down practical warnings about dangerous terrain expressed in the language of myth? Were they describing natural phenomena, avalanches, infrasound, hypothermia, that they could not explain scientifically? Or did they know about something that does not fit into our understanding of the world? The thing on the mountain. We must speak of this, even if we cannot explain it. 9 experienced hikers, a tent cut from the inside, footprints walking, not running, into the frozen dark. Bodies found facing away from the mountain, as if fleeing something behind them, branches broken 5 meters up a tree, as if someone climbed in desperate haste to see what was coming. 4 victims killed by crushing force, with no external wounds, as if struck by something immense and invisible. What did they see? We do not know. We cannot know. And perhaps that is the most frightening answer of all. After 60 years of investigation, the honest answer is this. We do not know what happened on Dyatlov Pass. Each theory explains some of the evidence. None of them explain all of it. The avalanche theory explains the injuries, but not the footprints. The infrasound theory explains the flight, but not the crushing trauma. The military theory explains the cover-up, but not the walk-in retreat. The paranormal theories explain nothing, and yet they refuse to go away, because the mundane explanations leave too many questions unanswered. This is what makes Dyatlov Pass endure. It is a perfect mystery, close enough to solve that we keep trying, far enough from solved that we keep failing. The mountain keeps its secrets. Today, Dyatlov Pass is a destination for dark tourism. Hikers make the pilgrimage every year, following the same route the 9 young Soviets took in 1959. They camp where the tent stood. They visit the cedar tree. They stand in the ravine where the last 4 bodies were found. A monument marks the site now, a simple stone marker with the names of the dead. Visitors leave flowers. They leave photographs. They leave small offerings, as if hoping the mountain will accept their tribute and let them pass unharmed. The mountain does not answer. Before we end, we must speak their names one more time. They were not statistics. They were not plot points in a mystery. They were people, young people, with dreams and fears and plans for futures they would never see. Igor Dyatlov, 23. He wanted to map the unknown. He died reaching for the tent, reaching for safety, reaching for a warmth he would never find. Zinaida Kolmogorova, 22. She kept diaries full of hope. She died face down in the snow, her hands raw from the cold, still crawling toward shelter. Lyudmila Dubinina, 20. She had to prove she belonged. She died in the ravine, her ribs crushed, her voice stolen. Alexander Kolovatov, 24. He kept secrets, even from his friends. Whatever he knew, he took it with him. Rustem Slobodin, 23. He could outrun anyone, except the cold. Yuri Doroshenko, 21. He climbed the cedar and watched the tent until he died. Yuri Krivonoshenko, 23. His mandolin is still in a museum. No one plays it anymore. Nikolai Thibault Brignoles, 23. His skull was shattered, but his face was peaceful. Semyon Zolotaryov, 38. We still do not know why he was there. We still do not know who he really was. And Yuri Yudin, who walked away from the mountain, who spent 54 years wondering if he should have stayed. The Soviet Union fell. The files were opened. Researchers have visited the site hundreds of times, and the mountain keeps its secrets. Was it nature? The blind, indifferent force of the wilderness, killing without malice? Was it the state? The Soviet machine, burying its crimes beneath a mountain of snow and lies? Was it something else? Something that does not fit into any category we understand? Something that the Mansi knew about long before the 9 young Soviets climbed into its domain? We may never know, and perhaps that is the most frightening answer of all. The dead mountain keeps its dead. What do you believe happened on Dyatlov Pass? Was this a tragedy of nature, a crime of the state, or something that defies explanation entirely? Tell us your theory in the comments. And if these journeys into darkness matter to you, if you believe these stories deserve to be told, subscribe and hit the bell. Because the archives are deep and the night is long. Thank you for watching.